The intention was always to have some form of film alongside the reporting. We weren't sure whether it was going to be that it was going to be this film, and we weren't sure that it was going to be like a kind of formal documentary. But we understood that facts and figures are really useful because they give you compelling things that you can use in a range of different arguments. But hearing people talking in their own voice about the impact of something is way, way more compelling. And so the idea was we brought Dan on from the very beginning of the project to just be like, this is going to be something, and if we capture it, it will work out. And initially we talked about doing 10 short films, one about each artist and their journey, and then we talked about maybe it was just a bunch of little short clips about like what the impact was, and then it kind of became this bigger thing. But it was really about seeing the reporting and that kind of impact story as being a multimedia package. So it was documentary film, it was impact report, it was narrative reporting, it was the voices of the artists in kind of photo summaries and things. So the whole package that went to the ministry was all of those things, and that was kind of the point.
I think it's worth noting there as well, though, is that while these guys were doing their reporting, Jeremy and Creative Waikato were good enough to give me free rein on the documentary. The documentary's all created by me with their help, but there was no looking over my shoulder or anything. In fact, I don't think anyone at Creative Waikato saw it until about a week before it was due for sending off to the ministry. So it was pretty awesome to have that trust in me to make it. So I think that's why it sits alongside the paperwork reporting. Yeah.
And partly that reason for that level of trust and that independence is that it's not like we weren't asking Dan to make a puff piece advertisement about the work that we do. And we had a discussion reasonably early on to say, like, you tell the story that you need to tell, and I mean, whether we send it to the ministry or not, well, once I've seen it, we'll work out what that looks like. But it was very much about telling that story. And that was the same way with working with the Huber Social guys who did the impact report. Again, it's an independent report. So we've got an independent storyteller, an independent statistical report talking about the impact of this project. It's not us just waving our flag and saying, this is really important. It's a whole bunch of other people who have that separation, being able to tell that story for us.
Cool. We had a little, you've spoken a little bit about this, about your approach to the filmmaking with me, and it felt really personal and really honouring the process of kanohi to kanohi, of like a personal conversation. So why did you choose that kind of cinematography and that visual styling in your choices here?
I think it's purely practical. There was so much information to get through and so many people to talk to. I think it's over 35 interview subjects in it. It's like a lot, and a lot of information to convey. So having people talk, tell it their way and intercut it with what they're talking about and what they're doing was a pretty obvious way to do it, I guess. And a lot, you can probably tell in the film that a lot of the interviews are pretty seat of the pants too. We're just grabbing what we could sometimes, and which I think works. It was always supposed to be, not too polished and a little bit rough around the edges, so it does have that authenticity to it. But yeah, I think that answers the question. Yeah. No.
Can you talk a little bit about the collaborative process with the participants? And you mentioned that you had 35 different interviews, and we can see that you travelled a lot around the rohi, so I was just curious about what that process was like.
Yeah, as you could imagine, there's a bit of a mixed bag of how enthusiastic some people were to be on camera. Margaret in Port Waikato was quite interesting, that she really didn't like being on camera and was really reluctant, but I think she was one of the most interesting people and always had really interesting things to say. But everyone was completely obliging, and yeah, some were quite enthusiastic and others maybe took a bit of coaxing. Liafa, the project manager, because she was always at the events and the workshops and stuff at the same time as I was shooting them, I got her to conduct a lot of the interviews based on questions I'd come up with and given her or worked on together. And I think that was really good because everyone trusted and liked her, so that made it a lot easier. Yeah, for sure. But no, everyone was awesome. Like, they were all super obliging. And yeah. Oh, that's
awesome. Can you talk to me a little bit about capturing that community impact? And that was really wonderful to see, and seeing all the participants and things like that. But yeah, about what that process was like and seeing the community being engaged.
Yeah, well, that was just a matter of trying to get us to as many of the events and workshops as possible and capture what was going on. Which, yeah, like basically it was what was happening. And then as things transpired, we started to single out a few people that would be really good to talk to, like the participants in the programs that we talked to that popped up there. And of course they were all really obliging as well. And as Jeremy said before, it was never we never set out to make a puff piece, and I think that's what I said at the start, is that I'm not going to. But it kind of feels like that in the end. It does. It's all so positive, and everyone's so complimentary of it. But that's simply because that's how it transpired. That's what happened. Yeah. Everyone involved was so enthusiastic about it, and everyone we talked to. So yeah, that's basically how it came out. Yeah.
An easy job on your part, trying to capture that.
Yeah, sort of.
Oh. Tell them about the many hours of footage.
Yes.
Yeah. There's a lot of footage to get through.
Yeah. Jeremy, I was hoping that you could talk a little bit about Creative Waikato's choice to really honour that intrinsic process of creativity and not being sort of gig-based or a body of work based. It's such a unique program and super inspiring for me as a creative arts therapist. So I know you spoke to it briefly in the film, but I was just curious if you could share with us a little bit more, because that's... Sure. Yeah, thanks.
It kind of is drawn from the entire kaupapa behind what Creative Waikato is interested in. We're working towards a Waikato region that thrives with diverse and transformative creative activity, and that means helping everyone who lives in this region to find the creative practice that resonates with them. And it's realizing that in order to be a thriving, functioning human, we need to have creative practice in our lives. And there's studies that show that from a neurological perspective, from a kind of skills development perspective, from a mental health perspective. One of the reports that I saw talk about 2 hours a week of active creative practice is the minimum requirement to kind of be our full thriving self. So in the same way that they talk about 30 minutes a day, pushing play, and 5 vegetables a day, and all of those other kind of things, 2 hours a week of creative practice is the thing that we should be having, and most people aren't able to do that, and partly that's the way that we structure lives, and humans are uniquely creative beings, and we all see that in childhood, and then as we grow older, we either forget how to use that skill, or we don't prioritize time for it, or life doesn't enable space for it, or we were told somewhere along the journey you can't draw, or you can't sing, or you can't do this or that, and all of that is so problematic. And so much of this mission and working with artists and highlighting the value of process over product is about trying to connect people to that, but also process is the thing that is so uniquely human that it's AI proof. It is the thing that guides us through life from birth to death. It is fundamentally transformative. It is connected to the nature of human rights, and so there's a really weird thing that happens in Western commercial contracts where it sees art as product. It sees art as things on walls and like music that you buy and stuff, and forgets that the act of creativity, the act of musicking, the act of telling stories, the act of doing that is actually the bit that's really good for our well-being, and that is the bit that brings joy and brings connection, and so I mean that's what this is about, really, is about how do you help people to find that. And artists become the guides, they become the navigators, they become the people who can help you to find the thing that resonates with you. And also underpinning that is the concept that while not all art is for everyone, there is art for everyone. So just because you don't like a film or a piece of music or a piece of visual art doesn't mean that you don't like film or music or visual art. It means you don't like that one specific example of it, and try another one and try another one and go on that journey and find that thing that resonates with you. And that's my soapbox that I'll get on a rant on for the...
Jeremy's quite passionate about this stuff.
Well, I think the film really beautifully told that story, and I think it was a real testament to the power and the transformational power of creativity. And you mentioned about mental health, and that there's that beautiful saying of like the remedy for depression is expression, and also acknowledging that authentic and intrinsic capability that everybody has. And I think even with the participants shown and how you showed them and all their humanness was really beautiful. What's next for the film? So.
Good question. We've submitted it to a few film festivals around the place to see if we can get the word out there, and there has been a few murmurings about streaming stuff, but it's all yet to be seen. So, but we hope, obviously to have as many people see it as possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Cool. And how can we support that as fellow creatives?
Got any ideas?
Oh. yeah. I just think the power of being seen, which was mentioned in the film as well, but seeing others be themselves is empowering to others witnessing that. So I think it would be really important for this film to go around to as many places as it could.
Yeah, we're hoping and in discussion to eventually have it on a New Zealand-based streaming service as a thing that like anyone can engage with. I think it's a story that is global, but like being connected to this place is so powerful. So having it be somewhere that can be seen here, and as soon as that's there, we'll spread the word as loudly as we can to get people to watch it. But we're also looking at other options to use it as a tool for sitting down with decision makers. So we're in discussions with a few conferences, whether that's like local government or Philanthropy New Zealand or others, around can we come to your conference and screen this film and talk about it? Because if you can get those people in a room to watch it, that can make a really tangible difference.
So this is the part where I pass it out into our audience if anybody had any questions for Dan or Jeremy. What was so successful in...
So, just a question in terms of like the format of it. It's awesome as it stands, but are you going to look at revisiting any other formats, like taking it into sort of formats and things like that?
I think Jeremy mentioned before that we did think at the very start about it being several short things, but my preference would be for how it is. But yeah, it can't. It's in sections, but I don't think you can chop it up. But yeah,
Over and above what it is.
Yeah.
Having said that, I have asked Dan to make me a couple of shortcuts that I can use for in those rooms where they're not going to sit for 75 minutes, but I can get them to sit for 5.
Yeah, we can definitely look at highlights that are thematic sort of thing. Yeah. It's so much information in there, and to cover all 10 artists, 10 mentors, the people involved, like everything, there's just so much stuff. It's sort of, I feel it has to be that length, but yeah, we are looking at those little snippets though. So
and I mean those snippets are more to entice people to watch the whole thing, not to replace that, because I think that this is the ultimate version of that story. But yeah.
Just want to thank you for it as well. It's really beautiful.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Can't wait to see it in front of the amplified crowd.
I was fascinated about the range of artists whom you picked for the film. That would have been quite a long procedure, quite difficult. I know you said that if they're already in the community, that would have made a big difference.
Yeah, so I mean, part of the selection process for the artists was in trying to make it relatively pain-free, because a lot of the time artists, when they have to apply for projects or funding, have to prepare like endless like reports and summaries and all of these things, and it's all of this unpaid mahi that then like one person in 10 gets selected. And so we tried to be like, in the first instance, what's the shortest like requirement we could have to get a sense of people? And it was like a couple of paragraphs about what would you want to do, who are the communities you work with, what are some examples of things you've done before. And so it was like, how do we make that really simple so that we can at least get a sense? And then from there we did a short list that we did interviews with them. And so it was again about the person. It was about sitting down with the person and saying, like, this is what we're thinking, tell us what you're thinking, do these things align, is there a resonance there? So that was the next part of it. And then the final part of it was a little bit also of being aware of kind of, I mean, you're playing a strategic game a little bit. We're trying to prove the value of this thing in a range of different contexts. So we wanted to make sure we were working with Māori artists in Māori communities and Pacific communities, and we were working with rural communities and regional communities, and we were working with rainbow communities and neurodiverse communities, and we were working with different art forms, and we had visual artists and performing artists. And so it's kind of like, how many of these boxes can we tick whilst also remaining really true to the kaupapa of the thing and ultimately holding the mana of the artists at its core? So there was a little bit of like, oh yeah, is it this, is it this, is this the right mix? And we happened to align with the 10 people who were a really fascinating mix of 5 were in Kirikiriroa, so we had a kind of central urban group, and then 5 were out in the region. We had 5 that were visual artists primarily and 5 that were performing artists primarily, and those were different combinations. We had a range of different backgrounds and like age ranges and all these different things, and so we were lucky ultimately, but lucky based on really good intention and a clear vision for what we were looking for. Yeah.
Jeremy, I thought it was fascinating, I've forgotten her name, the artist who then went and set up the registered charity. So her work, her mentor, and then was this quantum leap to what she now knew she could do because of the mentoring. I found that absolutely incredible that she lived in this little place and she had done that not only just because, but because of the mentoring process.
and so much of that is actually just seeing people. And it's not actually like the process changed people all that much, other than kind of helping them to recognize what they already had. So like Faye was immediately like a powerhouse at doing what she was doing and connecting with a range of communities in a really meaningful way. And it was kind of a vote of confidence to be like, yeah, actually you can do this, and you are doing it already. And I think that was for a lot of people, and I think that's reflected in the story, is it was like you were given permission, you were given the opportunity, you were given this chance to be trusted to do this thing that all of the artists were already doing, but they had this opportunity to do it in a really deep and meaningful way. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Faye is a really good example of that, because Leafa did say she didn't need a lot of mentoring. It was just the fact that she was selected and like backed to do her thing by the program, that she just excelled. She just took off with it. So that's the program itself did that.
So you said the artists were guaranteed income for 1 year. So what happened at the end of that year, and are those projects still continuing?
So yeah, the project was funded for a year. At the end of the year, the artists all went on different journeys, and so some have gone into teaching, some have continued running versions of programs themselves and applying for funding from other sources. Some have are kind of more focusing on other elements of their creative practice. Some have been focusing on parenting, and like it's a range of different outcomes. All of them are still creatively involved and are connected with communities. But that is the biggest challenge in any program like this, is that for it to work, it requires ongoing funding. Like, this is subsidy work. Like, you are paying people to do things that are made accessible. That requires funding, because it's not about selling product. And if you're trying to make it accessible to communities, it's not about charging people to attend classes. Like, it is a service that is being provided as a public good, and that was always the challenge. But that's also why we made the program where the artists were employed part-time in this role, so that they didn't have to completely give up whatever mahi they may have had beforehand, because that was too much of a risk for people to be like, quit all of your reliable sources of things to come and do this for 1 year with no guarantee that it continues. So that was the reason for making it a part-time approach, because it hopefully enabled some sustainability while we have this test case. But now the opportunity is, how do we use this to create really compelling narratives to decision makers? And I mean, unfortunate timing in the current climate of things, that we have this really compelling piece of evidence and perhaps decision makers that aren't as receptive to it. But maybe. And there are some things that we're working on at the moment around that.
Well, fingers crossed.
Off topic, how long has it taken you to grow that beard?
I have been growing my beard since April 2010.
What about yours? You don't have one in the movie.
Yeah.
I had a little one. He's got a little one.
All right. Well, I think we can all leave a bit more inspired, but that's for sure. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your really important kaupapa with us.
Thank you.
It was really awesome. So if that's it, then we'll leave the night. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Just one more round of applause for everybody.